Over the years, we've had many collabs in 7 Deadly Sins Grand Cross, and because this week is very dead, even though we just got a new one, the Attack on Titan rerun collab, I thought of ranking them all. The categories I'm going to be ranking are how good the units were relatively to when they released, how good the events were, how much the IP made sense to be in the game. Yes, that would be a category, but it's not going to be as important as the other two. And for last, how much was it actually relevant years later? By the way, all the rankings are subjective. If you want, you can put down in the comments what's your favorites and least favorite collabs we've ever had. Anyone and everyone's gonna have a different list. I just, speak from my own opinions. So to start off as the worst collab we've ever had, it's Maeve. I mean, I'm only including her here because she is in the collab tab, but this character was given out for free as an anniversary character instead of a character from the actual series, which could have been anybody that we don't already have, such as, Gold Armor Glocks, something like that. If they were gonna give a unit for free anyways, could have been an actual cool unit that people would actually care about, but instead they gave an AI crypto collab, K-pop collab that made absolutely no sense. The character itself is not bad, but I have to put negative 1,000 points for being AI crypto scam K-pop collab. I don't know how, but I think I've heard that they disbanded. How? They're not real. Unsurprisingly, Stranger Things comes out next. People usually call Stranger Things the worst collab, and that's because no one counts Maeve. So, we go from here. I mean, Stranger Things, first of all, makes no sense. The only reason why it was a collab is because I'm guessing Netflix owns 7 Deadly Sins, or at the very least the anime. So I guess they were like, oh yeah, Stranger Things, that'll be a good collab. It was not. The characters were horrible for the most part, especially Mike and whatever the other one's name is. And 11, which seemed great at first, eventually became extremely outdated like one banner later. It was very sad. The only saving grace is that Jim was like a funny character, and that was it. I know it's jumping the gun very fast, but Attack on Titan Part 2 is definitely the worst anime collab we've ever had. I think I'm gonna explain right now why. First of all, the characters are mid. Simple. That's first and foremost. All of the characters are mid. That is including the characters that came back with relics and the new characters. No characters are meta whatsoever, which is very unusual. And all of the events, if I go in here, are reruns. The story is a rerun. This is a bingo, so it doesn't count. This is a rerun. This is a rerun. There's no new event, nothing. That is the most lazy collab we've had thus far. Again, ignore Maeve. And I mean, you can also say that for Mushoku Tensei as well. Very lazy collab. But this is pinnacle laziness. Not even a new boss. Nothing. No final boss. Zero. Nada. We could have had a final boss Zeke or something. Nada. Zero. Horrible collab. The characters are terrible. They were buffed like 2 days later because they were so scared of people not giving them money, and the characters still suck post buff. Very sad. Maybe they'll buff again before the collab leaves, but I highly doubt. Next up, Mushoku Tensei, and honestly, starting from here, the collabs get way better. Those three first ones are just horrible, but Mushoku Tensei only goes at the bottom here of the decent collabs because honestly, no new story, and as I remember, it was a very lazy collab. It seems like the three devs are very overworked right now, and collabs with 4 new characters are just not enough for them to handle, or sorry, enough people to handle this sort of, workload. And the characters were okay. It seemed like they didn't really plan the characters ahead because the main character here, he had, a week to shine during the Chaos game mode, but other than that, only because of cost, really. Not very great character. The best character, or the best 2 characters, I would say, were both Ghislaine and Roxy. But Ghislaine has a replacement already in the game for some reason. Her passive has already been copy-pasted to a character that's better than her already, and the collab just happened pretty much. And then Rox is a very unreliable character that can work for very, very niche builds. I think the saving grace for this collab would have been the fact that, honestly, if you look at it, it's a collab that really makes sense on 7 Deadly Sins. The characters are, pretty much fantasy. It is like a I was reborn, different world type thing, and that's definitely cool, but the laziness of the collab really puts down points for me. And the free character has literally in her, I think, relic or passive, I think it's passive, that something only works if you have Rudius with her. It's just like the free character only works with a paid character. Very lazy, terrible design. Next up is KOF Part 2. Now, the only reason why I have KOF Part 2 under Part 1 was because of the same reason why I had Attack on Titan lower. No new events, as I can recall. This is a while ago. They just pretty much reused all the events. And the good thing about this collab, though, was I think it was the introduction of collab relics, which is a system we've still maintained and is very great. All the collab characters characters get the relics pretty much for free. No need for the other relic materials or anything like that. They could have easily done that, but instead they opted to make the collab characters very easily accessible with their relics and stuff like that. And they introduced very good relic for Kyo in this collab. The other old characters got horrible relics, so no points there for me. But the characters that came out, one of them was fantastic. Terry was an amazing character for a long time. Obviously he got powercrafted because that was years ago, but for a long time he reigned supreme in a terrible meta with Bond, and that gives points because the character was good. But the other character, dear lord, Yuri was so bad. He was so terrible at launch, and they didn't even bother buffing him or anything. He was just bad, and I guess that was it, right? He was bad, and that was it. So if you end up pulling multiple copies of Yuri in your rotation and pulled like no Terry, so you had to pick Terry at the end, well, cool, I guess. But again, the saving grace was the relics were very good. Since I'm going to be talking about the relics anyways, I move on to the next one, which is KOF Part 1. Slides in the next tier. And the reason why I have KOF Part 1 over Part 2 is because I think that the character designs from KOF Part 1 were much better. You know, relatively to their time, I think Kyo had a super cool gimmick with the ignites that we haven't seen implemented as well, I think, in other characters. The relic he eventually got from Part 2 collab even made him better, right? But at launch, it was already a great character, and he remained a meta character for a long time. Then you have Rugal, which was a fantastic character at launch, very strong as well for a cool Pierce thing. And now we don't have Pierce units anymore, or we don't have Pierce boosters anymore. We do have Pierce characters. A lot of characters have Pierce on their card, but we don't have the same level that it was Pierce AoE cards doing insane damage as we did back in the day. And then Athena, still somehow a relevant character because of her passive. Her passive has spawned many different passives that are similar but not the same, which just goes to show how relevant this passive is to take off true ultimate gauge. You know, a character that is a staple on the human team, Easton, does the same thing but only for humans, and then Estarossa does the same thing but only one orb, and you know, it has to be him. So like, her passive is so longevity wise important to the game that they spawned a bunch of passives that are pretty much the same. Other than that, the character sucked, but you know, that's something. And then Mai is hot. Not to mention we had a final boss for this collab, which we never had a final boss again for a collab. I don't know why, unless I'm mistaken. And the event they tried was very long, the coin event, but it was cool. It was an attempt of something that was related to the actual IP and never really done again in that fashion. They never done an event in the game that was really related to the IP. Maybe you can count the big Titan from Attack on Titan, the Colossal Titan, but even then, it's not the same. Next up, I have the original Attack on Titan collab. I think this collab deserves a lot of praise, even though I think a lot of things were wrong with it, because they tried something. Eren wasn't the greatest character, far from it, but at the very least, they tried to go out of their comfort zone and make a transformation unit. They failed so badly that they've never done it again, apart from Camilla, which I'm assuming Camilla was probably still like in development at the same time as Eren, so they probably didn't have a time to test if it was going to be a good thing or not, so they never really tried again. And I wish they did, because it just represents that nowadays they don't have the manpower and the willingness to actually try new stuff. They're just pretty much playing safe all the time, and Eren was a big gamble that didn't pay off, but at least it was a big gamble, and I very much respect it, you know. Is what it is. And at the time, for the events we got, they're in the game right now, so you can take a look. They were very good. This Colossal event spawned like other stuff similar to it, and I think the events of the time were very good. So Attack on Titan was a huge IP at the time. It still is, but I feel like at the time it was more beloved than now for certain reasons, and it was great. It was a great time. Everyone had fun. It was just a fantastic collab to be a part of. Next one, I actually had to move down a tier because I realized I was being a little too biased, but I think the original Slime collab had a lot of charm to it, and that's why it's being placed so high. The events were good. They definitely weren't as refined as later collabs, especially KOF having a final boss and stuff like that, but I think what it brought was a good IP that made complete sense. I think the best IP in terms of collabs we've had is Slime, and that might be a subjective opinion, but it is what I think. And what they did here was way cooler and more high effort, meaning also Rimuru having a ult with Meliodas, which we've never seen again. Collab characters should have stuff like this. A ultimate that has the 7 Deadly Sins characters, or at least one of them, right, represented within it is so cool. And again, never should be seen again on any collab. If, you know, just the main character of the collab needs to have this, but it would be very cool cool. You have Kyo with Meliodas as an ultimate. Eren and Meliodas, they have the same voice actors. It's like pretty cool, right? It's just, there is a lot of charm that came with this collab that we've never seen again. And it was the first one. The game had just released when this collab happened on JP. So the units weren't very good. They weren't very good even at launch. But I think the ranking might be a little biased and I recognize them. I just think it was better because of those factors. I think this ranking is going to piss off a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to want this to be lower. But I think the Shield Hero collab was great. I don't really care that much about Shield Hero. Let me emphasize that. I think IP-wise it makes sense because it's, you know, a fantasy thing. But I watched season 1 of Shield Hero. It was good. Didn't really care to watch season 2, stuff like that. But the characters had such unique and great design, especially Naofumi, in my opinion. He is such an original character. He got that taunt, which honestly Naofumi is still pretty good. He got that taunt, he got that crazy AoE that you need to have some hits on first, but once you get them, you can fully wipe a whole team. Such a fun character to play with, such an underrated character at launch. And then Raphtalia, I honestly think she played a perfect unit. She obviously had to be a unit that had to be run with Naofumi. You don't have to, but you know, it makes sense to be run together because of passive and stuff like that. All makes sense. And I think the units were designed in such a great way. Philo remained a stupid great character for a long time too. So quality of characters was definitely nothing to be scoffed at. And then the free character was amazing. Amazing free character. Like all the characters were fantastic. The events were great. I think this collab was a banger. Afterward, you have Original ReZero. It is also an IP that I think works incredibly well with Seven Deadly Sins. And the characters were very well designed. Some of them not so much, you know, so that is for sure. But, you know, Rem was such a perfect character to be free and remained meta for a long time. She was literally only power crapped by Nanashi, which is a character that out of nowhere got a relic that gives 30% basic stats to unknown. It took so long as well. So a great, phenomenal free character, which is stupid, strong meta unit for a long time. Emilia was a meta character for a long time with the unknowns and stuff like that. And it had great events, great story. I think the collab was very good. And then also, if it never happened, we wouldn't have had ReZero Part 2, right? I know that shouldn't be like a reason, but ReZero Part 2 enters the S tier for me. It was an amazing collab with two phenomenal characters. Reinhardt has definitely been power crapped at this point, but it's been a long time, so he should be, right? But Akina still hasn't. And Reinhardt was so powerful. He honestly redefined OP character. Like, after Reinhardt, if your character doesn't do a bunch of things, he's not OP. And the collab brought new events, even though they already had a decent amount of events from the, you know, old collab. They actually made new stuff. You wouldn't believe it, right? And I think the quality of the characters, the old characters could have had better relics, and that's why it's not number 1. Honestly, if the old characters had better relics, this might have been a number 1 collab. The best relic was definitely Ram's, which was pretty good. You know, there's some stuff you can do with Ram. Emilia's relic was dog shit. To be fair, if she had a really good relic, that could have been a problem, but you know, that definitely something to point at. The Ram relic was not great either. If she had a relic that, you know, worked in the back, this could have been a different story. And I mean, there was nothing they could have done with this character unless they actually just straight up buffed her, right? But you know, they gave her a good relic. You know, the character just sucks. But I think ReZero Part 2 was a phenomenal collab. Everyone enjoyed it, and it just brought us phenomenal characters. Honestly, something that collabs, you know, after have been trying to replicate. I think, you know, collab characters with unique designs, like Akina that work on a specific team and Reinhardt were replicated in Shield Hero in a way, and were replicated again in Mushoku Tensei as well, to a certain extent. So it definitely created like a pattern for new characters that definitely worked once, so they definitely want to keep trying, and it works sometimes. I think Naofumi was a great example of that. My number 1 collab though has to be Slime Rerun, and so many people agree with me. Slime Rerun was such an amazing collab. Obviously, highly anticipated collab. It was the first one we've ever had, so a rerun of it was, you know, we've been aching and waiting for a rerun of Slime for the longest time, and when it finally happened, it did not disappoint. The character was amazing. Rimuru. Shuna was okay. For a little while, she was actually meta, and I like how she, you know, was meant to be a Pierce buffer for Rimuru, so the characters made sense together, unlike, you know, Terry and Yori, for example. And, you know, the events were great, but the biggest thing for me was, you know, Rimuru is still a phenomenal character, by the way. He's meta right now. It's been so long since the collab happened, and he's meta currently against Demon King. So it goes to show how well designed the character was. But the buffs for the old characters are what really brings this up for me. They straight up went ahead and actually buffed the old characters, which right now some of these characters are definitely completely power crafted because it's been like a year and a half or so, right? Sure. But at the time, Milim was very good PvE, somewhat good PvP, a character that was completely useless in the game at launch. When the collab happened, it became actually very good. Rimuru didn't get the best treatment because obviously they didn't want to give Rimuru the best treatment because there was a new Rimuru, right? But he still got a pretty good buff, especially considering Attack on Titan came back and the old characters did get buffs, but they were so minor and the relics were so bad and just terrible buffs. The old characters from Slime got buffs to their passives, got a new relic, got buffs to their cards. While you take a look at Attack on Titan, no buffs to the passives. No, there were some card buffs that were pretty irrelevant, to be honest. Horrible relics. And to see how much they cared more about the Slime characters is very, very apparent. Great collab, should be number 1. Let me know what you guys think. What was the best collab in your opinion? Definitely will be, you know, somewhat relative to what your favorite IP of the collabs is. I know there's, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, my favorite IP is not even a collab yet, which might never happen because as you can tell by the list of collabs we've never had a collab with any Shonen Jump manga. By the way, Black Clover just left Shonen Jump. Maybe there's a possibility we're gonna eventually have a Black Clover collab. That would be so good. Maybe not though. Have you seen Mushoku Tensei collab? Very little effort. You know, they don't have enough manpower these days, I'm assuming. But regardless of it, you know, I think the choices of collabs we've had are generally pretty good, you know, aside from some of the bottom ones, but that's about it.